You're listening to
and such a short amount of time to do it in. We were really
a Mamma Mia podcast.
From Mamma Mia, I'm Mia Friedman, and you're listening to No Filter, a weekly interview podcast with people who tell their stories very candidly and aren't afraid to be all kinds of vulnerable.
That was a quick wee.
Did you say you need a quick wee? Or
I think you did a quick wee. No, I've done my quick wee.
I have to do so many quick wees. My life is a quick wee.
A quick wee.
Have you pressed record on your voice memos?
Oh, you want me to do that as well? But we've got Zencaster. Do you need all of your... Oh, shit, sorry.
Do we need that too? Before there was Zoe Foster Blake, there was a young woman named Zoe Foster. No, sorry, I've got an Apple Watch and it's ringing and it's Jace and I'm confused. I don't know how to make it stop.
Mine's hiding because I can't... It's still, the haptics still come on even when you put it on silent. Like, leave me alone.
Zoe Foster didn't have a globally successful skincare brand with witty descriptions wrapped in a peachy coloured packaging. She didn't have over 700,000 people following her on Instagram, watching her every move. She didn't have best-selling books. She wasn't married to one half of Hamish and Andy. She didn't have 2 kids. But what she did have was her words and a dream to be a writer. So how did Zoe Foster from Bundanoon in New South Wales Southern Highlands become a global sensation, a best-selling author? How did she earn a cult following and become a lady startup? Over this 2-part episode of No Filter, I'll be speaking to Zoe about all of it, starting with how the heck she ended up where she is today. From a cigarette promo girl to an accidental entrepreneur. Here's part 1 of my chat with Zoe Foster Blake. You and I began a long time ago when I got a CV, and of all the CVs I got, there was only one that had a reference from Rupert Murdoch, and I thought that was incredibly impressive.
Did you say impressive or obnoxious?
Impressive, because I thought it was real until I started reading it. What gave you the idea to do that? How old were you? Where were you at in your life?
I was 23 and I was working at Smash Hits. I wanted to work for you. I had sent you a request to do work experience when I was 16 and later discovered that I'd put the facts in the wrong way. And that's why you never responded. Such a dickhead. It's such a me thing to do. So I just wanted to be in the building. I wanted to work with you, for you, anywhere, just sit in your cupboard. And I was highly underqualified for the job, so I knew that to get your attention, I had to do something outrageous, and I thought that might be it. And also, I had to be job hunting, so I was fit at sending in CVs and really being very specific. So if I applied for a kids magazine, I'd write it as an 8-year-old or something like that. So I knew that I had to stand out to get your attention.
Because that took a lot of confidence, but more than that, it took a lot of creativity and a lot of risk in a way.
I guess I just thought I've got nothing to lose.
Yeah.
Like at best, you'd remember me as a bit of a nutter, which you did. And at worst, you'd just chuck it in the bin and go. And I'd go, well, that technique doesn't work. Don't do that again. So I was going to learn something either way, really.
Straight away, I thought, I've got to meet this girl. And then you walked in and I just thought, wow, there's something amazing there. And you didn't get the job. I can't even remember what the job was.
I was going for deputy editor of, I think it must have been Dolly.
I think it was Dolly, and I was the editor-in-chief. And you didn't get the job. But then as soon as the beauty editor position came about, I tapped you and said, I'd love you to come. I think you'd be amazing for it. But then did you have any experience in beauty? How did you find that world?
I genuinely didn't know what the job was when you offered it to me, but I was up for it. I had one eyeshadow palette, so you definitely didn't hire me for my beauty and my smarts and my, I didn't know what skincare, I didn't know anything. I was 23. I had no money, and I liked that you had faith in me, and I felt trusted to be able to write in my style and tone with beauty as the sort of sharing vessel between women. So for me, it was always about getting to write in a magazine and have a readership, and the actual thing I was writing about was less important.
Because you had such tone, you had such a voice, you had such a distinctive voice that was there in that first CV, writing like Rupert Murdoch, and that's there in the copy and all the marketing branding for Go-To.
Yeah.
All these years later, but there's quite a few years we have to fill in between that. So the whole beauty world, I always saw that the people that I thought were most talented, I always would put in that role because it's no accident that beauty editors become editors.
Yeah.
And I just assumed that that's what you would want. And a few years later, I don't know if you remember, the next thing came up and I think it was a deputy editorship or something, and I sort of tapped you on the shoulder and said, guess what? And I thought you'd be so stoked, but you said, I don't want to do that. Why didn't you want to move on up?
I saw what you were doing and what the other editors did, and it was fascinating and very outside of my skill set because it was a people management role, it was a business role, it was organisational and all the things that I'm not good at. And I just saw you get to write one thing, which was your Ed's letter. And I was like, I want to write much, much more than that. Thank you. And I'd never thought about being an editor. It wasn't, I think a lot of people hold that as a goal, but for me it was to write. And what you're forgetting in that conversation is that you said, why don't you just write a book or something? Because you could see that I was getting frenzied and I wanted to do more, but it wasn't necessarily a new job in the magazine. But, you know, I'd started writing air kisses and I started my blog, Fruity Beauty, and I just had so much writing to give back then. So it was a smart move because we all got what we wanted.
Yeah.
I still got to stay in the mag and also fulfill my passion for writing externally.
Because a lot of people get to the point with beauty where they hit a ceiling on what they can do. And did you love the lunches and the launches and the products and the gifts and the playing with things? What was your favourite part about it and what did you find difficult?
It was ludicrous to me that was a job, that we'd get paid to do those things. I think in my first week of the job, when Bron was handing over, I got to go to Byron Bay for lunch in a small plane, and Jennifer Aniston's haircutter did my hair. I was like, this is nuts. And I remember getting some makeup and going, I get to keep this? I couldn't believe it. And it was everything that I ever could, and that's why I wrote Air Kisses, because I was like, people wouldn't believe the shit that goes on in this role. Like, fashion at that point was getting all the movies, all the TV shows, all the attention, but beauty was this monster that was waiting to burst, and now it really has. But I found it hilarious. The women were great. They were a real bunch of fabulous, smart, funny women, and we were basically a gaggle of women that looked like we were going to a hen's party all day.
Because the beauty editor, something that a lot of people wouldn't know is that the beauty editor is more connected to the beauty editors at every other magazine back then
Than your own staff.
Yeah. So you are like a little gaggle, even though you're ostensibly competing with each other. It's not like that.
No, not at all. Great, great friends, dear friends even to this day. But I'd also shit my pants a lot because we had to do presentations to big, scary advertisers and clients and, the head of Estee Lauder, and woo, that was a baptism of fire. I had to constantly lift in that role. But, but after a while I thought, I've probably learned and done all I can do here. I remember doing very elaborate beauty call-ins, like I'd make it a menu or I'd make it a song or an essay, because I just had so much creativity and I was busting for ways to use it. And I'm sure everyone thought I was a bit nuts.
Even a little bit to this day, I remember just being amazed by your out of office.
Yeah, I still love doing that.
Your out of office would be like a story with a theme, and it would be like this incredible piece of writing. And I'm like, she's just sick for the day, and she's put this. So you had this creativity that was just like coming out of every pore. On the home front, I think when I met you, you were dating Craig Wing, and you were a wag before the word wag was even a word.
Yeah.
How did that happen? How did you meet a footballer?
The honest truth is, I was a promotional girl when I was 18 for Benson and Hedges. Isn't that a laugh?
A cigarette girl.
A cigarette girl. I was dead broke. I deferred uni and I'd moved to Sydney, and I still don't know why. I was like, I've had enough. I need a year off. So entitled and ridiculous. Moved to Sydney, had not a dime, not a friend, moved into a share house and had
Moved from where?
Bundanoon, so an hour and a half south of Sydney. And had a very lonely, strange year where I did like night packing for Coles, tele marketing. And then I got some girls on the street asking me to do promo work. And I'm like, $20 an hour? Yeah. And I actually made some of my still to this day best friends from that clique of girls. They were awesome. They were all from Wollongong and down south like me as well. But so we would dress up in gold and we'd hit the city on Friday nights and sell cigarettes in clubs and bars. Can you imagine that was an actual job 22 years ago now? And so one of those nights when I was doing the 12 to 4 a.m. shift where you'd have glow sticks on your tray and walk through clubs he was there minding all his coats for his friends and sober and bored, and we just got chatting. And it just sort of went from there. So,
what was that world like? Because that was part of your first book as well, wasn't it? Air Kisses.
Yeah,
the main, or was it the second book?
Oh, Playing the Field. Yes,
Playing the Field. So that was about a wag.
Yeah. Oh, look, it was a funny weird world. It's a lot for a young woman, and this was pre-social media, and really just mobile phones were just coming in, and the internet wasn't a thing. So I really do feel for the partners going through it now, but back then, we were just a couple of dags, all really young, and we took it all into our stride. But I think as he became more successful and famous and, the attention was on him a lot and, get a lot of attention from women, I definitely struggled with that. It was a hard and weird world, and there was a clear division between the footballers and their partners back then. So, yeah, it was an interesting time. But then we split, and that's when I started at Cosmo, and that was my butterfly moment. I felt like Sarah Jessica Parker. I had this cool job. I was in the city. I was single. I loved it, and it came at the perfect time, and it was very much, part of the fabric of my life to have, first of all, that lonely year in Sydney by myself, and then that year of blossoming and being around strong, awesome, creative, brilliant women at Cosmo and getting my confidence back, really.
I think now we'd call it a relaunch.
Yeah, but
after a breakup where you.
But I went back to him as well. There was more.
I'd forgotten about that. So how long did you relaunch for before you went back?
I had at least a year, maybe a bit more.
Wow! And then you went back. How did your friends feel about that?
Oh well, you know what? He'd been sending flowers and so on and trying to get me back. So they were like rolling their eyes, going, "Oh, for God's sake, would you just get him off your back?" That makes me sound arrogant, but it was just you know what, it's buzzing around. Sometimes if you don't go back, you don't know for good, and you'll always wonder. But it wasn't the right move, it turns out. And yeah, I moved on. So I left the relationship for good when I was 29.
That's older than I remember. How long were you together in total?
Probably about 8 or 9 years, but with a gap in the middle.
Did you think you were going to get married? Did you want to marry him?
I thought so, yeah, particularly when I was younger. I just thought that was the way it goes, and I think that's the way that a lot of people think in their early 20s and late teens, I guess this is it. But I didn't know anything about the world to know what else was out there and who I really was. And I sort of laughingly say, don't lock into a partner until you're really a bit older and you've had a bit of experience. But yeah, I was just assuming that would be the way it would roll, even though I think in my heart I knew that I probably wouldn't be that happy.
I can't remember if it was during your relaunch break or after you left him for good that you had your version of the rules.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? How did that go?
Yeah. Oh, I loved the rules. Still do. I mean, that
for those who don't remember or who weren't born yet, when the rules came out, can you explain what it was?
It's a bit of kind of a hideous book, I suppose. But I was in my beauty cupboard, which is also where the books were stored at Cosmo, and it fell off the shelf and hit me in the head.
That is like something on Sex of the City.
Yeah, totally. Couldn't have been more of a movie scene. And I read it and I became enchanted and obsessed with it. Basically, it's this idea of, let them chase you, think of yourself as a prize, and then everyone wins because someone feels like they won you and you feel like you've made someone that really wants you. You get to be with them. So, I mean, it informed my dating and relationship writing at Cosmo, and then eventually textbook romance, because it sort of helped me with my self-worth and self-esteem at a time when it was really low. So I think sometimes you just look for validation anywhere. And that for me was that. It gave me the strength I needed at that point.
A lot of young women who have fallen in love with you and follow you and see what a powerhouse you were would not know that in those early years when you were with Craig, he was the star and you were nobody yet.
Yeah, very much the arm candy.
Yeah, and I was listening to a podcast about Carolyn Bessette Kennedy and how when she hooked up with JFK Jr., it was difficult for her because he walks in the room and everyone is all about him. And for a woman, that can be really difficult. There's no male gaze. It's just your life becomes dominated by the female gaze of your partner.
Yeah. Thank you, firstly, for drawing that parallel. A lot of people don't see that. Carol and I are basically the same person.
Except she's dead.
Yeah, I didn't mind. I was just as starstruck as everyone else in terms of I adored him and I was like, he is great, and I was right there with them. But I was, I didn't get offended by being the plus one. I am an introvert by nature, and it's only, I mean, I always put myself in the writer role. So I'm like, I'll just be a writer and I'll plod along. But when you have some success, people want to interview you and flip it. And that becomes a change of the paradigm. And that's sort of what I struggle with. But it's now, you know, then it was all about him, and I was quite comfortable with that. It didn't really affect me.
I'm Mia Friedman, and you're listening to No Filter with Zoe Foster Blake. They often say that you have to have a really shit job to recognise a good one, and a really shit relationship to recognise a good one. It was no coincidence that the worst relationship I ever had was the one before I met my husband. After you broke up with Craig for the second time, did you date for a while again before you met Hamish?
Yes, I had a wonderful year of being a grown-ass woman with money, confidence, a good job. I lived by myself and travel, and really just had a wonderful free time. I loved it. It was, you know, I felt like I deserved it and I'd earned it because I'd been in a kind of not happy relationship for a while, and I really wanted to experience joy. And I did, and I think that put me in a really healthy mindset for when I eventually settled down with Ham.
What were you thinking about your career at this point? Were you still at Cosmo? Had you written the book? How was the blog going? I mean, it's so funny thinking of you starting a blog.
Do you know what I found the other day? I still have the email you sent me about Mamma Mia asking if you should use TypePad or WordPress.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks
for saying.
What did you go with?
I went with TypePad because you were the only person I knew who had a blog. To be fair, you didn't urge me to use TypePad because it was amazing. You just said, well, I use TypePad. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't know anyone else that has a blog. I'll use TypePad too. And TypePad doesn't exist anymore.
I don't even know. Yeah, I don't even know if it's around anymore.
And you also gave me Dean, who was the guy who designed the first Fruity Beauty website. Logo. And he designed Mamma Mia and became my guy for the first 2 years of Mamma Mia. And I think he was just a friend of your brother's or something.
Yeah, he was. Dino. They went to uni together, I'm pretty sure.
So at what point did the blog start, and was it a conflict? Like did your bosses in the magazine get angry? It was hard to...
No, that was you. No.
Did I get angry?
No, you were still editor-in-chief of Cosmo then, and Sarah Wilson was my direct report as the editor. But I had been haranguing them, saying, Cosmo needs a blog, we need to be in the digital space. And at that point, ACP was owned by 90%, and it was going to be all this bureaucracy, and it was too hard. People would have needed a password to access the blog, or a 90% account. That was really clunky. So I just sort of went rogue, and that's why I used Fruity Beauty, because it was a very thinly veiled sort of pseudonym. And I didn't mention that I worked at Cosmo. I just said that I was a beauty writer, and then posted all the shit that I didn't have space to write in the magazine.
Oh, so it was anonymous.
It was anonymous. I was fruity. I mean, I put photos of myself up, but no one knew who I was. It didn't matter. It was like mum and a few of my friends. But I would get up early and I would write my blog for the day, go to work, be a beauty editor all night. And on the weekends, I would be writing my novel Air Kisses about being a beauty editor. And I was just firing. I had all this energy. So by the time I was 29, I think I must have written 3 books and finished maybe the blog was still going. No, I think when I moved to Harper's Bazaar, it wound down. I didn't have the time anymore. And then worked on Amazing Your Face, because I was like, right, I'm done with beauty. I'm going to put all the best stuff into a book and I'm done. I won't work in the beauty industry ever again after that. Little did I know. So I was in a really good space. I was working at Print and had...
Which was like a beauty website.
Yeah, creative agency and a great team, and felt really confident and competent. And that was a good, happy space. I was very happy.
You've got such a strong entrepreneurial streak, but did you ever think, why am I working for Harper's Bazaar or Cosmo or Print? Why don't I start my own beauty website, which you essentially had in Fruity Beauty?
I did. Well, Marguerite Kramer, who offered me the job while I was at Harper's, said, we want to give you infrastructure and finance to make Fruity Beauty, but as a full functioning platform, beauty platform. And I remember everyone going, you're mad, Harper's is the best beauty job in Australia. Why would you do that? But I loved the idea of being a pioneer and taking beauty digital with full backing and a team of staff. And I just loved the idea of that challenge. So that was essentially Fruity Beauty on 10 Red Bulls.
But you didn't own it.
I didn't own it, no. But it
never occurred to you to own it.
No.
But why?
No. At that point, I was happy to have a salary and just rock up to work and go home. Like, I didn't have any interest in business ownership, and I didn't at all until go to. And I don't even know why I did that. Like, I'd never wanted to be a business owner. I was very happy just writing books and writing and just being a writer. But, it doesn't always work out the way that you think it will. And it turns out I do like just making things. It's not necessarily books. It's just things and good stuff and projects. So, yeah, go-to fits in that sense. But no, I had no true entrepreneurial spirit in that sense. I didn't want to own anything.
How did you meet Haim?
We met at a beauty function when I was 23 and he was 21. He and Andy were hosting, and I just thought he was very funny, straight up. And I was in my relaunch, so I was very happily single and not at all interested, but we became very firm friends. We had a similar sense of humour, and they were these cool, fun boys from Melbourne, and all the Sydney girls were like, they're fun, let's hang out with them. And they just had a great energy about them. And Haim and I just became really close mates, and he had a partner and I had a partner, and there was nothing romantic about it.
How do the dynamics of male-female friendship work over that period of your life? Because it can be tricky if you've never been together, and usually one person likes the other a bit. Or
yeah, I can honestly say I had a lot of platonic male friends at that time, and I still do to this day, although I think as you get older they're usually just your partner's friends and mates that you have in the industry. But it was just like sharing, I guess, the equivalent of memes. Forwards, email forwards. And it was basically whenever he was in town or I was in town, we'd hang out and with a group of people. So it was just sort of that thing of like having an interstate buddy.
But there was nothing there?
No.
And when did that change? And how did it change?
Like, I thought of him as more like a brother, like a very funny.
Yeah,
that sort of thing. That change. Well, I'd been single and gloriously wild and free for a year, and he had broken up with his partner, and I think I just realised that when he left Sydney after we'd go out for dinner and have drinks, I was very sad. I was like, that's a weird feeling. Why do I don't usually feel like that when I've had dinner with another friend. I don't think about them all the next day. So it was a slow unfurling and figuring it out. And I guess I figured that I didn't want to mess up the friendship if I'd got this wrong, and I didn't know how he was feeling. And so it was very slowly, and just a gentle sort of awkward few conversations.
How does it work? Like, do you sort of go, hey, I kind of like you more than just a mate?
Oh, look, I can't remember the exact conversation, but I think it was just a little bit of someone would put a little foot forward and say, I've been missing you or thinking about you or something like that, and that would open the space for a bit more. But we wanted to take it slow because we didn't want to get it wrong. And quite frankly, at that point, the idea of kissing him was just weird, and I didn't know if it would work because I'd been my mate, for a long time.
Yeah.
And I'd clearly compartmentalised him in that world. But you know what? I really rate having a strong friendship and respect and admiration for each other before the physical develops, because it's all sort of in place, and then you just have to figure out if you like kissing them.
And were you worried that you wouldn't?
Yes. Not because of him, but just because, so
what
much
if it doesn't work? Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, God, I'm starting to think of this man as the person who will be the father of my children. What if it's stuck? It stinks.
And at what point of his fame level was he at that point? And were you apprehensive about going into a relationship with another famous guy?
Oh, no. Not by that stage. No, he was on air every day and very well known by then, I think. And I was, carving my own path and doing my own thing, and having been down that path with my ex, and having been, had a masthead profile as well at that point, didn't bother me. We got each other. We understood. Because
you were a leader in your field by then, and you had more of an identity than when you'd been with Craig?
Oh, certainly, yeah. My identity was starting to come together, but still, fragile. Like, I still don't know who my identity is, and I think turning 40 this year was like a bit of a wake up. I'm like, who am I? And to be clearer about that and more, assertive about that, I think that's part of growing older. But yeah, I was fine to go into a high-profile relationship.
Do you remember where you spent your 30th birthday?
Mykonos.
Oh, that was still part of the single and out there phase,
yeah.
Very much.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
Every birthday in Mykonos, if possible.
And then how old were you when you and Hamish got together?
That was that year. Yeah.
So by
10
the
years
time
ago.
you turned 40, which was what, just last year? This year?
Now, yeah, a few months ago.
Oh, happy birthday. I'm terrible.
Thanks, mate.
How did you feel about turning 40? And compared to how you felt about turning 30, because you're obviously at a very different life stage.
Yeah, fine. Absolutely fine. The number didn't worry me. It did worry me that I was stuck at my house in lockdown, level 4 lockdown. So yeah, no, this birthday was just about, flowers, cake and being with my little family, and that was fine. Not the 40th I'd imagined, as so many people would testify for this year. But yeah, no, I'm fine with being 40. I feel proud. I feel fortunate, and I know we're not meant to use the words lucky and blessed, but I do feel that. I feel very privileged in where I am, and all of the support and the timing and opportunity that has led to this. So I feel grateful.
Next week on the second half of my chat with Zoe, we speak about how she became an accidental entrepreneur with her cult skincare brand Go-To.
For years when I was pregnant or breastfeeding and I was sitting in the board meetings, I'd be like, do. As soon as we'd start talking about financials, I'd just get so bored. But you can't do that. It's not cute after a while. So I have to show up and be a professional.
Why she thinks infidelity is not a deal breaker in relationships.
I know, I was like, should I be worried about all this?
And the things she chooses to share and not share on social media.
If we want to promote things and ask people to buy our books or watch our shows, that there's a contract in place.
If you want to hear more from Zoe, you should check out her new Audible original book. It's called Clean Slate, and you can find all her other novels over on Booktopia or any independent bookstore by following the links in our show notes. Thanks for listening to this episode of No Filter. We want to hear from you about what your favourite episode of No Filter is. So call the pod phone on 02 8999 9386 and tell us. Or if you're not the phone call type, you can send us a voice memo to podcast@mamamia.com.au. The exec producer of No Filter is Eliza Ratliff, with assistant production by Leah Porges, and I'm Mia Friedman. I'll see you on mamamia.com.au.
Mamma Mia acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this podcast on, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures.